Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, and I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool News. And I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Heap Software. It's titled, Managing Technology in the Classroom. Is it the responsibility of the teacher or IT? Now, before I introduce our guest speaker, I want to take a couple of moments to highlight a few items. First, today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. In a couple of days, we'll send out an email to everyone containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And second, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. In a couple of days, at any time, during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I hope we'll have about 15 minutes or so at the end when we can address your questions. We also have a chat function which can be launched via that blue group chat icon down at the bottom of your screen. Please use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or any other concerns you may have. However, please don't use the chat to ask our speaker questions. He simply won't have time to monitor the chat during his presentation. So if you want to ask a question, please use that Q&A panel instead. And with that out of the way, let me formally introduce our speaker. Tim Williams is Director of Product Marketing at Heap Software. He's a former United States Army officer with more than 20 years of experience in high tech. And during that time, Tim has helped develop tools for managing multi-platform and mobile environments. And he's also consulted with major commercial and government organizations to plan their endpoint management and security management strategies. Welcome, Tim. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the latest changes, not only in our technology, but in what's available on the market for schools. And so basically, we're trying to solve a problem today in the classrooms. And it's easy to talk about technology, but really at the very top of the challenges that the schools need to deal with is, curriculum and testing requirements. Curriculum and testing requirements drive everything else that we do. They drive the technology, they drive the teachers' behavior in the classroom, and as well, we deal with the challenge of those energetic students. That's not a new challenge, but it's obviously a huge distraction as teachers now also have to deal with loads of technology. And I say teachers deal with it because even though, it's primarily the responsibility of IT, the reality is when we decide to use technology to enable that curriculum, when we're in some cases required by state regulations to include technology in testing, it does ultimately fall to the teacher, and that gives us all another challenge to deal with, which is how do we enable them to meet that challenge? And of course, we subtract from that some the hours in the day, and hopefully we don't come up with a negative number. So today, one of the main focuses of what I'll be sharing with you is some new technology from Apple known as the Apple School Manager and this whole ecosystem that's been developed to make it easier to meet some of these challenges. But I want to start out with a couple of questions for you so that I have a better understanding of what types of devices that you are managing in your school district. So you should see a poll up there on the screen right now. And I'm curious, if it's an overwhelming majority of just Apple or just Windows, or if there's a pretty wide mix of device types that your school district uses. In my experience, there aren't a whole lot of school districts that are exclusively one platform or another. There's almost always some type of mix, and what drives that mix can vary quite a bit. I've suggested here it might vary by grade level, by location, but in some cases I also recognize it can be, well, I don't want to say random, but it can be a little different mix. It may be driven by things like, simple purchasing decisions or pilot programs that you may be running to determine where you're going next. And obviously that adds another layer of complexity. So let's take a look at what the results were, and it certainly matches up with my anecdotal experience that almost 3/4 of you out there have some mix of operating systems that you're responsible for managing. And that raises really one of the biggest challenges, not exclusively to schools, but in today's environment where we've got this enormous proliferation of device types and operating systems that we're responsible for managing. So one other poll question before we shift over to a little more of the formal presentation. And this is related to how often the endpoint technology you have to manage changes. Some school districts I deal with, may not change the overall technology adoption, but they are frequently running pilot programs to try out new endpoint technology. Others have a cycle maybe every 3 to 5 years. They really relook, are we going to stick with iPads? Are we going to shift to, some other device? And other school districts tend to be driven a little bit more by just what new technology has appeared on the market, and that drives the whole cycle. So there's nothing set in stone in advance, but there's always the possibility of change, just depending on what comes out on the market. And then there's always a certain number that just, for whatever reason, says we have something that works and we're not changing. I envy school districts that can say that, because if there's no change, you've removed a huge challenge. And that looks like a pretty fair representation, again, of my personal experiences and observations out there. That 3 to 5 year cycle gives you, lets you kind of make the full use of the useful life of the equipment itself without racing into new technology too frequently. But I'm interested to see that it's almost 9% of you that are running a pilot program every year, and that's an awfully fast pace, and that must be an enormous challenge for you. Hopefully, there's not a lot of actual district-wide adoption on that frequent a cadence. So I want to begin a little bit differently than I normally would, and primarily because of what you just expressed and what we observe in the market about this proliferation of technology, of device types, of operating systems. Just to give you a real brief, 5 to 10 minute overview of our specific solution that is used in managing the classroom and how it relates to that, broader environment of technology at the endpoint. Because it's really important, I think, as you look at changing, endpoint technologies, that you don't add the additional complication of determining, new tools for managing that technology every time it changes, whether that's the annual pilot program or whether it's a complete shift every 3 to 5 years. And really, when I asked that question, I wasn't even accounting for the fact that you may be, all Mac or all Windows, but there's a new operating system even within that environment. So Heat Lantern's been out there on the market for about 12 years, and it began as a fully cross-platform Mac and Windows client management solution. So within client management, it offers a complete range of capabilities for, beginning with deployment of the agent itself out to all of your computers, but complete inventory, over 700 information items related to the installed software, to the user, to a variety of hardware information, and also gives you the ability to attach certain custom information items, which typically is used for things like cost centers, or class information, class schedule information, anything that you may need to use to better report on and configure those computers. Now, once you know what you've got, of course, there's deployment and migration. This is what I just mentioned. You know, even if you are in a much more stable environment, not changing what operating systems you have at the endpoint. We've certainly seen in recent years a very rapid acceleration of the cadence of operating system upgrades. Apple's on an annual schedule with both iOS and with Mac OS. And Windows is too, although most of their updates are considered minor, it still is an operating system update, even from Microsoft on an annual basis. So LandRev enables you to deploy full operating systems through traditional imaging. And on the Mac, that includes our patented technology that lets you image those computers while they're actually in use. And you can imagine the number of weekend and evening hours that can save you in scheduling. But it's also important to note that we support the newest technology, in particular from Apple, that's called the Device Enrollment Program. And I'm going to dig into that in a little more detail shortly because it's directly related to the classroom management. But that's a system where, similar to what's done on mobile devices, the actual operating system comes from the vendor, but you're able to manage that deployment and specifically configure it for your needs. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Complete remote configuration. Many school districts rely on teachers in many cases to do kind of first level troubleshooting support, and even students I've seen in some districts. So to expand your ability to remotely configure devices can reduce your reliance on non-technical people for that level of support, and also, increase the time to resolve issues. And all this stuff is part of the solution. It's not a bunch of add-ons. It's not a complex suite or platform. It includes full screen sharing, remote control as well. The software management has become more complicated because it includes not just traditional applications, but also the management of apps that are deployed directly from, for example, the iTunes App Store. And LandRev can manage all of those things. Patch management, it's management, it's security, it's something you just have to do. And as you may know, he is the owner of PatchLink technology, which is really the granddaddy of patch management. And so full Mac and Windows cross-platform patch management is built in to LandRev, not just for operating systems, but for all those third-party applications, the Firefoxes, the Adobes that we try to keep up with patches on. And finally, LandRev can also offer power management, which gives you the ability to get those green IT policies out of the binders and out there onto the computers and actually enable you to save real dollars for the school district. Now, put together, all of those things add up to complete PC lifecycle management for Mac and Windows computers. But there's more than that. In addition to the client management for Mac and Windows computers, LandRev includes full mobility management. We'll be focusing on some of the specifics for classroom momentarily, but this does include the full range of device management for iOS, for Android, for Windows mobile devices, including provisioning, including that device enrollment program that I mentioned. Enforcement and configuration of devices to comply with your security policies and to protect student privacy, to protect school district property, and with, importantly, automated actions to be able to remediate non-compliant devices. Mobile content management, this gives you the ability to distribute documents, media files, textbooks, tests, a class syllabus, whatever it might be, to devices in a way that can control whether or not students are able to copy or share those outside of the container. And, obviously in the case of tests in particular, you won't want to allow that sharing. And so that technology is built in, and all of this can be targeted through smart policies that are built off of any of the data that we collect, so the class information, user information, device information. And finally, we manage all of the apps on mobile devices just as we do on computers. And so, put all together then, this is complete PC lifecycle management for Mac and Windows computers, complete enterprise mobility management for Android, iOS, and Windows mobile devices. So it's end-to-end support for just about any device that's out there on the market right now, and we consider it to be unified management for smart connected devices. A few years back, there was a very large school district in Texas that was rolling out a project with 60,000 iPads, extremely ambitious project, and obviously was looking at management tools to be able to manage that rollout. And so they looked at they looked at several other kind of point solutions for mobility, but the reason they told us they felt LandRep was the best fit was not just because of that broad and deep feature set, but because they said, it's iPads today, it might be something else in 3 years or 5 years. Just as all of you said, you're often at least considering different technology at the endpoint. So to have a solution that can manage all of those different device types, all of those different operating systems, is a way to future-proof your school district, a way to be ready in advance for changes in endpoint technology without having to, uproot all of the management tools that you've already got in place. So let me ask you one more poll question before we move into the classroom-specific stuff here. And this is, I'm curious to know what kind of mix you have of tablets or other mobile devices versus computers or laptops. And I guess just, if it's mostly tablets in the classrooms, just answer that. But if you really do have a mix, whether that's again by grade level, by subject, whatever it might be, I'm curious to know what the majority of the classroom technology that you've got is. We certainly see a mix in a lot of school districts. Often that's driven by grade level, so that, for example, I see a note that says the poll is not visible, and I'm afraid I'm not sure how to fix that, but if someone else on the line could take a look at that.
Well, all right, Tim, we'll take a look at that while we, maybe we can come back to that in a little bit. Do you want to continue, and then we can come back to the poll at the end? Yeah,
we'll go on through, and if we have time, we'll come back to the poll. So certainly there's a mix in a lot of school districts between mobile devices, tablets, and computers, although typically it's if a tablet is acquired, it's a replacement for a computer and vice versa. Not every school district has a one-to-one program. I have yet to encounter a school district with a 2-to-1 program with 2 devices for each student. So once we get that technology down in the classroom, though, it's very quick for teachers to see the additional challenges that come with it. So it's very easy to recognize the vast potential for a more engaging classroom experience that the technology can facilitate. But at the same time, we've got more than just devices. We've got users to associate with those devices, whether they are CART devices that are shared between students, whether it's a one-to-one program or whether, and all of the apps associated with it. So who chooses those apps? If the teachers are choosing those apps, how do they get down to the correct classroom? How do they get to the correct student, and how do they get configured in a way that they're most useful? This is where the real tug of war comes in, I think, because teachers can see the potential, IT can see the challenges, if I may oversimplify. because learning tools make the experience more engaging. Everyone can understand that, but now we've got a much more complex array of technology that has to be managed, and teachers aren't really trained or prepared and don't have time to do that. And so the classroom has to be set up, but again, that's a technology configuration. It's not like arranging the desks. It's not like coming up with the outline for the lesson plan. And apps can accelerate learning, they can enhance learning, but they have to be properly assigned to users and licenses and a lot of the other things that IT has to manage. And finally, the teachers have to manage their classes, but if managing classes includes managing technology, well, how do we assign the appropriate admin rights so that teachers are able to do that? The last thing in the world we want to do is start opening up all of our endpoint management solutions so that non-technical people have the ability to configure devices beyond what their training really qualifies them to do. And at the same time, they have to have a certain degree of control to really leverage the technology that we've acquired for the classroom. So I want to focus now on some technology that's in the process of launching from Apple right now that's called Apple School Manager. And it's a really exciting new ecosystem. And I refer to it as an ecosystem because, I think about what Apple did, 15 years ago with really revolutionizing digital music through an ecosystem. Apple wasn't the first company to make digital music players. They weren't the first company to sell music online, but what they did was develop an ecosystem that made it easier for people to get the music they wanted when they wanted, and they managed a lot of moving pieces between record companies and individual consumers and devices. So we've got, I think, a significantly more complex array of moving pieces that has to be coordinated, and Apple School Manager is designed to do that. It's designed to make all of our jobs easier in technology and at the same time to give teachers a lot more power to really manage what they need to do in the classroom. I think this will result in easing the burden on IT without demanding a high degree of technical work by the teachers in the classroom. So Apple School Manager is a centralized system, an ecosystem, and so within technology, we've now got the ability to sort of predefine the basic roles and permissions, and then hopefully click the easy button. But we're managing then the relationship between the school district and Apple for purchasing things like apps as well as devices, but also managing relationships between teachers, students, classes, and so forth. Now, what's important to note is that all these moving pieces are orchestrated by the Apple School Manager, but none of it works without a management tool, an MDM tool, in this case, Heat LAN Rev, in order to actually move things where they need to go. So Apple School Manager actually kind of folds together several things that are pre-existing from Apple, which is the device enrollment program. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail shortly. But the device enrollment program already exists. So if your school district already has a DEP account, to sign up for Apple School Manager, you'll be migrating that over to ASM. Similarly, the volume purchase program already exists. This is Apple's mechanism for buying apps in bulk at discounts, but also giving you the ability to manage, distribute, and reclaim licenses that have been assigned out to users or to devices. They don't have to be assigned to specific users anymore through VPP. Both of those pieces, those are powerful tools. They get folded into Apple School Manager. Apple also introduced a new concept, which is managed Apple IDs. In order to have managed Apple IDs, you have to have a way to manage them, and that's where LandRev comes in. But the problem that was really solved there is a lot of school districts have to deal with the hassle of getting students to sign up for their own IDs. Typically that involves parental permission, and then it can cause conflicts with how app licenses are assigned. So managed Apple IDs are a new concept that came in with iOS 9.3, and that gives you the ability to create and issue out Apple IDs that remain under school control. So it really removes a lot of those complicated challenges that we had previously. Apple School Manager also includes student information system integration. Obviously, you can see where that fits in, because as we configure devices and users by classes, we've already got that information in the SIS, and so building that into the Apple ecosystem makes it that much easier for you to configure those devices in advance. And then finally, the other new concept is shared devices. Not every school district is using a one-to-one program, possibly for budget reasons and maybe for other reasons. And so shared devices now are configurable through LandRev, so that you can assign based on login the correct apps and configurations to the student that's actually using the device at any given time. So let's look at a couple of the pieces of this and how that looks in practice and what that does for you. First, let's talk about the device enrollment program. I had mentioned this earlier as something that Apple is moving towards, and I'm not the greatest reader of tea leaves, but it certainly seems that Microsoft is taking similar steps. So this very well may be in the future on multiple operating systems. But right now with an Apple School Manager, you can manage in LandRev, and that's a LandRev screenshot up there. You can manage the configuration of devices actually before you even receive them. Once you order them through the device enrollment program, LandRev will pull that data down into your console so that you've got the devices visible to you even before they've been received by the school district. And this enables you then to set up the out-of-box experience. That's actually a pretty special relationship that LandRev has then with the Apple ecosystem, because it lets you get in between the device and the user, which is something that Apple's not normally real keen on, but they recognize the necessity of being able to configure devices right from the start, straight out of the box. And so that includes the ability to customize the actual setup wizard that users will see when they first turn that device on, so that you can turn off, for example, things like Siri or the acceptance of terms. You know, your students aren't really accepting those terms, the school district is, so that's a common thing to turn off during the setup process. You also have the ability right from the start to lock those devices into LandRev, lock those into mobile device management. We all probably remember a few years back that Los Angeles schools, I think it was, had purchased a bunch of mobile devices and learned, the children learned pretty quickly how to unlock them from the management system and thereby lift all of the restrictions that have been placed on the devices. So being able to require enrollment in management right out of the box means there's no way really around it. Even if you do a factory reset on the device, it's just going to start right back through that same out-of-box experience, that same setup wizard. So we can set all this up, including the out-of-box experience, before we even receive the devices. And I'd mentioned to you earlier that we use smart policies for distributing apps for distributing content, for assigning devices to users, and those smart policies are also assigned in advance as well, so that now I run through that setup wizard out of the box, and immediately after the device is activated and set up, it'll also have all of the apps and content deployed to it. I'm going to give you a quick kind of illustration of what that looks like. We can take these devices now, and instead of having a ton of hands-on time in IT to configure them, we've done all the work in advance through setting up these policies. One person can't really manage and certainly can't hands-on configure 1,000 devices, but you can configure, a dozen policies. And once you've done that, you can hand out devices, literally still shrink-wrapped if you want to. And once they're taken out of the box, then the users can go ahead and follow those setup prompts, the setup wizard. It'll require authentication, based on directory integration, and in most cases that's Active Directory. It can display to the student school technology policies so that they understand the rules going in. Can't guarantee that they'll read it, but we can display it. Then again, through directory integration, we're able to attach all of that other data from Active Directory, from your custom information fields, all that other information that you attach to the device, and that enables all of the policies to be customized. LandRev will push out a couple of apps associated with our architecture. LandRev Apps, which is an on-device user self-service portal. So for example, to provide apps to students to self-install. LandRev Safe, that's the content container. So that's where test material, media files, other documents would be distributed to the device through that app. All of the other configurations, which are customized on the fly for particular users as appropriate, are pushed down to the device as well. And then it's automatically added to policies, as I mentioned earlier. Now, you'll probably have blanket policies set up to do, take certain actions that will apply to everybody. That can include even automatically sending customized emails that might, for example, include a written copy of that school technology policy. So whether or not you read that when you were first starting up, you've got a copy on the file. You'll want to set up security policies, and it's important to note that it's not just a policy, but you can actually automate remedial actions if a violation is detected. So just as an example, if a device is jailbroken, you may set it up to automatically remove access to school district email or other school district assets. You could set it to pull all of the content out of that content container, for example. Or you might simply lock the device and send it a message saying, come to the principal's office. It's up to you what actions you attach, but the important thing is that it doesn't simply report on violations, but it can automate the remedial actions. And finally, you can have department or even class level policies that do things like push out specific apps and that content that I mentioned earlier that's targeted to specific users or types of users or grade levels or classes. And all of that happens really in a span of just about a minute or two from the time that that device is turned on. It's completely hands-off for IT. It's very fast and seamless and easy for users, for teachers, and for students. So let's go one more level down and take a look at how we configure the classrooms. So in order to configure classrooms for Apple's Classroom app, which is really part of this whole Apple School Manager ecosystem that I mentioned, we have to define the who, what, and where, the users, the devices, and the locations. So the users, of course, are divided into categories, students and teachers, and those are defined here. This is a LandRev screenshot. We also define the classes here and assign devices to users. Now, through Apple School Manager, we're able to actually download all of that information from School Manager, which again includes that student information system integration. So you may or may not have that SIS integration set up. You can also import this data from directly from your SIS via, or not directly, but by creating JSON files out of your SIS. That's a little bit too deep technical dive to go through the steps of that, but there are other ways to get the information in, and Apple's integration with a variety of student information systems is still very much a work in progress. But you can actually test this technology even if you're not enrolled in Apple School Manager yet. So once the information is in here, whether you built it automatically out of ASM or whether you built it partly manually or through other automated processes in LandRev, now we push the easy button. And the easy button builds all the specific configuration profiles that go out to these managed devices so that they will simply work the way that they're supposed to in the classrooms and classes that you have defined. And so here's what we now can do in the classroom. Your teachers will have the Apple Classroom app, which is configured automatically by that button I showed you within LandRev, so that the teachers now can see the devices and the students that are in their classes. And with those devices, they can now open specific apps on all of the devices in the class. If you want to make sure everybody's using their app, the app they're supposed to, that's virtually impossible, just running around and looking at the devices. But the Classroom app configured by LandRev enables the teacher to go ahead and choose the app that they want all the students to be using and to open it simultaneously on all the devices or just on selected subgroups within the class. They can also lock the devices, attention mode, eyes on me, the device is now locked. Additionally, they can lock it to a single app, which is sometimes referred to as kiosk mode. Apple calls it single app mode. This is something that would often be used, for example, in a testing situation, so that everybody's got that testing app open and they can't close it and they can't switch to another app, so they'll stay on task. And the teacher is in control of all of this. And finally, the teacher can virtually look over the student's shoulders now to see what they're working on, and depending what other technology you have in the class, can actually share that student screen, for example, up to a TV at the front of the room, and that's all done from this Classroom app. And the Classroom app configured to do this for the right students, for the right devices, for the right class, comes straight from that LandRev console. So I know I have covered a ton of ground here, and hopefully I have left enough time to answer what questions you may have.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for that presentation. It was extremely interesting. And I do know that you did have a poll that didn't work when we first went to it. So before we get to the questions, why don't we try and do that poll one more time, and then maybe you could talk through the results with us. But while we wait for people to take that poll, why don't we tackle one question, while we wait? And that's from one of the attendees, wanted to know whether Apple School Management works across platforms, or is that part of the LandRev solution that you're providing? Can you talk about what Apple School Management does and does not do with respect to other platforms?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because obviously, LandRev's, our whole DNA and our whole history is managing a variety of different operating systems. Apple only manages Apple. So this is really iPad focused, the Apple School Manager. But I should note that, that workflow I showed you for onboarding devices, there are a few differences because device enrollment program is Apple specific, but you can enroll your Android devices in an automated way exactly like that and assign them to classes using LandRev's policy-based management. What you won't have with those other platforms is that direct integration with the rest of the ecosystem. So for Apple, that's their App Store and VPP and all of that stuff as well.
Okay, great, thanks. Now, so why don't we come back to the poll question that we had up there, which was, in the classroom, does the school district primarily use tablets or mobile devices, computers / laptops, or both? I hope we've given everyone enough time. Tim, do you want to just take us forward? Do you want to hit the result button, or do you want me to do it for you? Yeah, I'm going to hit the result button and see what we get. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So, so 2/3.
Is that something you expect to see?
Yeah, 2/3 of the folks on the line have some mix. It's interesting to me, to be honest with you, that it's as high as almost 10%. That's exclusively mobile devices, and it seems to be kind of moving in that direction certainly more slowly than some of the hardware vendors had anticipated, but it does still seem to be moving that way, especially in my experience in the younger grades and the elementary grades. Those devices are a little easier to manipulate, a little easier to use, and offer, frankly, more management options, such as what we were talking about today with Apple School Manager. Okay.
All right. Great. All right. Well, why don't we move back to we've got about 18 minutes left to tackle the rest of the questions that have come in, and if there are questions that we don't have time to get to today, someone from Heat Software will definitely follow up with you. So don't worry if we don't get to answer your question directly on air today. But Tim, why don't we come to someone who's got a question about the scope of when they implement the LandRev solution. Is it something that traditionally a school as an entirety takes on, or a district? I mean, can individual teachers sign up for this? How does that work generally?
For LandRev itself, that's an IT tool. LandRev is typically adopted district-wide. It depends on the district. We certainly have had experiences with very large districts, especially that are a little more decentralized and may have areas within the district that do their own thing for management. But the advantage of LandRev's architecture is that with the pretty granular role and scope-based administration, wherever you're setting it up, you can define the roles, you can define, who gets to manage what. So in other words, an administrator for a certain group of devices will only be able to manage the devices in that area or at that school, and even within that, we can restrict the rights to say, and this admin can only distribute software, but can't, reset or reimage devices. So there's a lot of options for how you can define administrative roles, but it's an IT tool. It typically is adopted district-wide, but it enables that classroom level usage.
Okay. Well, here's another question that is related. Someone wanted to know whether, maybe they're not ready to look at a school-wide or district-wide solution. Is it possible to set up a pilot project for just a small, like a classroom or a couple of classrooms? Is that a feasible way to approach this?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's really a best practices way, I think, to adopt most technology like this. You can actually download LandRev and set it up for yourself. It'll be an eval that times out. We do recommend that you get in touch with our pre-sales technical folks to help you out with that. Not because it's too hard to figure out, but because you have day jobs, and setting this stuff up is what we do all the time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And could you explain, just really clarify, where does the Classroom app actually get installed?
Yeah, the Classroom app is, that's a good question. The Classroom app is only on the teacher device. So that's an important distinction. The student devices don't need that. It's just the teacher device that uses it. And it's all the stuff that goes on under the covers when you click that orange configure classes button within LandRev. That then pushes out the configuration profiles to the appropriate student and teacher devices, and as well can push that Classroom app out, or it can be downloaded directly from the App Store as well. So the app itself is only on the teacher device.
Okay. And what about the device requirements for Classroom? What do they need?
So Apple has a tech note that gets into the real specifics, but probably the most important one that you'll be configuring with LandRev is that student devices have to be supervised, and that's an Apple term, supervised. But supervised devices actually give you a longer list of commands and configuration privileges, and those are actually required for the Classroom app. Just to pick a specific example, I talked about teachers being able to share student screens. You can't do that unless the device is supervised. So as we were looking at the checkboxes and that device enrollment program, and I guess I can probably jump back to that screen. So if we look at those checkboxes, you can see that one of them there is actually to supervise the device. And that's required for the student devices.
Okay, all right. And one question which was interested, where you talked in the poll, you talked about school districts and asked whether they were an Apple district or a Windows district or whatever.
Yeah.
Is there a role here? Is there a role here in a BYOD system? I mean, how does that work? Is that something that could be handled under LandRev?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because certainly BYOD has been like a wildfire the last few years in the corporate world. We don't see it as much in school districts, but we have a lot of commercial customers as well, and LandRev is absolutely built for that. If you think back to that workflow I walked you through where you hand out the device in the box, similarly, if employees bring their own devices in, they can enroll in management that way, and again, be provisioned with everything they need. We've seen in a handful of school districts, certainly teachers with BYOD devices, but I've talked to a surprisingly high number of, surprising to me, number of school districts that are actually letting students bring their own devices as well. And absolutely, that illustration of onboarding was just that. It was one example. And that workflow applies in BYOD. It applies to school-owned devices. It applies to Android. It applies to iOS. And with some differences, we can actually help you manage BYOD computers if you moved in that direction as well. Okay.
All right, great. Now, during your presentation, you did go into detail about how the devices can be provisioned and how actually LandRev, you can insert yourself between Apple and the customer to sort of get these devices provisioned. Does that include assigning the iPads to particular people? Is there a way to automate assignment of iPads to people?
Yeah.
Or does that have to be done manually?
Right. So it can be done manually, certainly, and typically right now the school districts that are going through pilots are doing it manually because they're only doing a few classes for the pilot program, and the ASM system is designed for pulling everything in. So a lot of it gets automated through ASM. Once that student information system integration is all set up. In the meantime, then within LandRev itself, we've got some of our own automation tools that can automate that device assignment to a degree, by matching names, for example, by matching other data points to your the directory integration that we've got. So there's a lot of options for that to automate it to varying degrees. And obviously that becomes more important the larger the scale gets.
Okay, right. Well, thank you. Let's move on to another aspect. Is it possible to test the classroom app without ASM integration?
Yeah, that's a great question because, and I hope I haven't sounded too much like an Apple salesman today. I think they've got a great idea with this ASM ecosystem that they're setting up. But the reality is that they are still very much in development of that ecosystem. A lot of pieces are in place, and look, it's late summer right now, so not only is it possible, I'd recommend that if this is something you think will fit your technology environment, you really ought to be testing that classroom app. What it does require, though, is those configuration profiles that you build through LandRef. That's not something Apple does for you. That's not part of the ecosystem. You need a management tool to build those configuration profiles, and that's what that window I showed you was, where we defined the students, teachers, devices, and classes. That's actually to configure the classroom app, whether or not you're signed up for Apple School Manager.
Okay, all right. So I think you may have just touched on this next question, which is about using shared iPads without ASM. Is that possible? It sounds like with LandRef it is. Can you just explore that a little bit about using shared iPads without ASM?
Well, it might be technically possible, but for all practical purposes, managed Apple IDs are required for shared iPads, and the managed IDs are only assigned through Apple School Manager.
Okay.
So again, there's probably some workarounds your Apple SE could tell you about, but I would say for all practical purposes, shared iPads really require Apple School Manager.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Now, one of the attendees also had a question. It sounds like a customer, actually. He said, after I installed the Classroom app, I couldn't open it. Why?
Well, the Classroom app does not even function unless it has that configuration profile deployed to it. So you have to go through those first steps, the ones I walked through on that screenshot within LandRef, where we, again, identify the teacher devices, the student devices, and the classes. It's just one button. You click there to configure devices, but what it's actually doing under the covers is creating these XML-based configuration profiles and deploying those out to the devices so that when the teacher opens the app, it not only functions, not only opens, but when it opens, the teacher will see his own class and students and devices that he's able to manage then. But it absolutely requires those configuration profiles. Doesn't require Apple School Manager, as I mentioned, but it does require the configuration profiles that you can build inside of LandRef.
Okay. All right. And we have, we've got a couple of minutes left, but another question here, maybe the last one, is when, someone wants to know, when will SIS systems integrate? And if they ever do integrate, which ones are going to do so?
Yeah, no, that's a good timing on that question. I actually had a call with Apple this morning I asked them that exact question. The only one they've publicly announced that's integrated is SunGuard. There is a mechanism in place that you can, export and upload from virtually any SIS right now. SunGuard's the only one that's a pre-built integration with Apple. And over the next few months, they're going to be announcing more. But there is another mechanism for exporting and uploading that data. And again, as I mentioned, you can also export that into JSON files and go straight into LandWrap as well.
Okay, great. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for today. I just want to remind everyone that we do have some questions from the audience about the presentation, getting a copy of the slides and so on. We will be sending out an email, usually within a couple of days, that will contain a link both to a PDF of the slides, as well as the ability to download the audio portion of what you heard today. So look for that email in a couple of days. But in the meantime, I just really want to thank Tim for that was an excellent presentation, extremely informative. I also would like to thank Heat Software for its support today. We are now going to call it a day. If there are any late coming questions that we did not get to today, someone from Heat Software will contact you directly to get you answers for any questions you may have had. So thank you again to Tim and Heat, and this concludes today's webinar. Thank you so much. Goodbye.